Today we are discussing the Harrapan civilization, which we also known as Indus Valley Civilization or Melua. Before that, please do subscribe to my channel and don't forget to press the bell icon. Let's jump into history. It's British India in the 1920s, and over the last few decades these odd stone seals keep popping up at ruins near Harappa and Mohenjodaro along the Indus River Valley. They baffle everyone with their inscriptions in a never-before-seen written language. Archaeologists intrigued by this started excavating these previously ignored sites. They soon encored a 4,500-year-old civilization, a civilization completely absent from the historical record, one of the earliest urban civilizations in human history. It flourished alongside ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia and China around 3300 to 1900 BCE, or was bigger than all of them, a civilization that built wonders, not two gods or two kings but to sanitation, a civilization were at war, made up of massive, planned cities built in brick, masters of bronze and sculpture. They created their own writing system, traded across a vast sea, and possibly invented the world's first indoor toilets, and then vanished for reasons still not completely understood. So what was this civilization in the Indus Valley? What did they achieve, and what does it have to do with rubber duckies? Well, let's find out. The Indus civilization existed from around 3300 BCE to around 1300 BC, give or take a few centuries. But do you really prosper at around 4,500 years ago, between 2600 and 1900 BC? It covered an area of over 1 million square kilometers. That's about 1 Bolivia or 2 Spains, or even better, 6,250 Liechtensteins. It had the largest population and territory of all the Bronze Age civilizations, like Mesopotamia, Egypt and ancient China, like almost all early civilizations. The Indus civilization developed around dank river valleys. Their farmers were able to grow a massive food surplus along the banks of the Indus and Hakra rivers. Today, the Indus is still a powerful river. The Hakra has almost completely dried up. Back then, the Hakra River may have been more productive than the Indus. We found much more settlements along the Hakra than we have on the Indus, since the Hakra was much more powerful in the past. People think it might be the ancient lost Saraswati River of Hindu literature. Since this civilization wasn't just based on the Indus, and since Indus Valley civilization is a bit of a mouthful, the term Harappan civilization is often used, since Harappa was the first city of there, as we discovered. So, I'll use that for the rest of the video. The Harappans weren't like other Bronze Age civilizations. The other ancient states, like ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt and China, all had the following ingredients: a strict hierarchy of classes, state monopolized use of violence, power focus on individual leaders like kings and pharaohs, centralized state-controlled economies, monumental of religious and political structures, a powerful religious institution with its own hierarchy, and a strong sense of elitism and exclusivity. Whereas in Harappan civilization we have no evidence of kings or priests kings. For the Harappans there are no royal tombs or palaces, no evidence for a state religion, no temples, pyramids or ziggurats, no signs of an army, weapons, slaves or powerful political capital. The Harappans weren't some peaceful utopias. A state can't exist without violence. But it seems that they had no actual enemies, and they themselves seemed more interested in trade than conquest. All Harappan citizens seem to have lived relatively equal lives, rather than building palaces and temples. That happened seem to focus on building public baths and sewage systems. We have no idea how the Harappan government worked, but the Harappan civilization may have been split up into several different domains, each governed by a city mayor rather than kings. There may have been village, town, city and then regional councils, all overseen by a supreme Harappan council. So rather than Harappan Empire or Harappan Kingdom, it was probably a Harappan Federation, which kind of makes them sound very futuristic. One of the defining features of Harappan culture is how well planned their cities. They tended to focus on three main aspects. 1. Water drainage and bathing held an almost religious significance in Harappan city planning. Every Harappan home had a dedicated bathing floor used daily, built with watertight brick floors. These floors sloped towards a small drain, usually cut into the house wall, and this drain brought dirty water out of the house and into a brick-lined sewage system underneath the main streets and channeled water out of the city's sunbathing rooms. Small staircases so someone else could pour water over a bather, kind of like a proto-shower. Excavations at Harappa have encouraged islets in almost every house. There are usually big pots of sunk into the floor, although some of Mohenjodaro had seats. Waste from the toilets was directed into the drains and then out of the city or into large jars sunk into the ground outside the home, kind of like an early septic tank. The Harappans had multi-story buildings. When water had to be drained from upstairs, drains are often built inside or alongside the walls. This safely brought water and waste from higher floors down to street-level drains without soaking people below, which would have been a hazard the citizens of cities like ancient Rome would have had to deal with. We found quite a few ceramic toys in her app and drains. It seems that her app and children may have been the first to bring toys into the bath with them. This could be the earliest prototype of the rubber ducky. Other toys like puppets and carts along with miniature cooking tools and other toy furniture have also been found. Amongst all the rooms of the Harrappans, though the Great Bath Mohenjodaro, nothing like it has been found in any other Harappan site. The Great Bath seems to be the only Harappan building with some sort of religious significance. This public bath is an impressive building, mostly storied, with a 2.4 meters deep bathing pool in the center. The pool is made from precisely fitted burnt bricks coated with a layer of tar, making this from the earliest examples of waterproofing in history. Here you can see the well and drain used to fill and empty the pool. We have no idea who used a great bath or why, but ritual bathing seems to be our best guess. The dedications put towards building such an impressive structure and its symbolic location in the largest Harappan city speaks volumes to the importance of water and bathing in Harappan society. Other impressive feats of water control include Dalla Vera's massive 16 man-made water reservoirs that surround the city and make it appear to float loath. It's also had an impressive dock and canal system to standardization. Large Harappan cities were usually hundreds of kilometers apart compared to Mesopotamian cities, which were just on average 20 kilometers apart. The Harappan state maintained almost complete uniformity across these massive distances, uniformly like a standardized brick at every single Harappan site. We found bricks to follow the exact same ratio, 1:4. This guaranteed good building standards crossed the Harappan world. Standardization extended to units of weight. We found cubical stone weights across bigger up in cities down to small farming villages. The smallest weight they had was 0.856 grams, and then the average weight was about 13.7 grams. City planning. The main streets of Harappan cities were usually oriented north-south and east-west. Generally divided it up, and settlements into blocks. Narrow and often crooked lanes ran after main streets. So, the cities weren't built on an exact grid pattern. Access to the houses was from these lanes, avoiding the dust and noise of main streets. Walls usually surrounded Harappan settlements. There was usually a separately walled area built on a man-made mound known as a citadel. Here you would find most of the important buildings like warehouses, granaries, and at Mohenjodaro, the Great Bath, these citadels seem to have been built as defense against floods rather than armies, though. For example, Mohenjodaro was built on two massive mounds that raised the city above the Indus River floodplain. The walls supported the mounds and added extra flood defense. Mohenjodaro higher western owned was their citadel, and it's about 12 meters above the plain, while a lower eastern mound held the lower town. This lower townhouse between 40 to 80,000 people. Building these mounds was a huge investment. It is estimated to have taken 10,000 workers about 400 days to complete all that work just to put the foundations of Mohenjodaro in place. When the city was founded, about 700 brick-lined wells were built to provide drinking water. No new wells were built over the many centuries of the city's existence, so the city's founders took the growth of the city into account when they built all 700. In some Harappan cities we found the remains of brick platforms and trees planted alongside streets to provide public seating and shade, and we even found a large jars half sunk into the ground into which rubbish could be thrown, which was then brought to a nearby dump. We have nothing that useful to decipher Harappan writing, and so it remains undeciphered to this day. All we must work with is the short inscriptions they left behind on these tiny stone seals. Every seal has two things: an image, usually an animal, and an inscription. The most common image on the seals seems to be this chunky unicorn. The seals could have been used like stamps, but it's that they were more often news like identity cards or passports. Any Harappan writing on paper or papyrus has been destroyed by the passage of time. This may be why we've only found about 450 mostly repetitive signs. There could have been a bias towards the kind of words that are written on the seals, like names or jobs, and if we found a written document we would find more common words than those more signs. Imagine if people tried to reconstruct the English language using only the words that appeared on passports. The Harappa people were mostly farmers and herders. Barley and wheat were the main crops, and we can see the beginning of South Asia's spice obsession with the Harappans. Garlic, turmeric, ginger, cumin, and cinnamon were all grown locally. We've only found one trace of coriander, so that's good. Cattle and water buffalo were the most important domesticated animals, followed by sheep and goats. Chickens, camels, and even elephants might also have been domesticated. The hunter-gatherer societies around them, the Harappans, traded with them. Instead, hunter-gatherers could collect exotic products like honey, wax, ivory, silk, and wild plants, and then exchange they received harap and crops and manufactured goods like bronze tools. Harappan internal trade was conducted on the rivers they controlled, and foreign trade was mostly conducted across the sea. We know it at between 2600 and 1900 BCE. The Harappans traded with the Arabian Gulf, Mesopotamia, Central Asia, and Iran. Mesopotamian texts mentioned the following items as imports from Melua: lapis lazuli, gold, silver, copper, timber, ebony, ivory, tortoiseshell, chicken, buffalo, peacock, dog, cat and monkey. Apparently Harappan merchants seem to have been a common sight in Mesopotamia, but Mesopotamia merchants never seem to have sailed inside the Gulf, which suggests that Harappans were the better merchants and sailors. We discovered every dice for games and gambling at sites they visited more than 1,000 kilometers from Harappa as an isolated Harappan town called Shortago, located in a modern-day Afghanistan. It seems that the Saraswati River played the biggest role. As we saw earlier, there was a dense cluster of Harappan cities along the Saraswati River. This area was probably their breadbasket, but around 1900 BCE the river began to dry up for reasons still being studied. Links discussing this are in the description. As the crops died out, cities were starved of water. The Harappans along Saraswati fled their homes in search of greener pastures. By 1300 BCE the entire Harappan system was gone. The memory of the Harappan civilization, their great cities, their beliefs, their language and their writing system disappeared under the earth. That won't sustain until they are rediscovered 4,000 years later. The Harappans were one of the greatest Bronze Age civilizations, but they weren't the only one. The Bronze Age saw the rise of urban societies, fast trading empires and military powers from Greece to Egypt to Mesopotamia all the way to ancient China. But how did all this come about and why did it end? I hope you enjoyed my efforts. To show your liking, please subscribe to my channel and don't forget to like, share and comments. Thanks for watching.